Control C. Yeah, just drag it over.
Yeah, I just prepare. I just feel, yeah, I just feel it's, one word.
Okay. My single whatever.
It's her sick. I
Is
don't know if she got that.
88.
88, yeah.
Spread the flowing seas abroad and pilgrims walk the skies. I sing the wisdom that ordained love shines to rule the day.
The moon shines full at God's command, and all the stars obey. I sing the goodness of the Lord hath filled the earth with food.
He formed the creatures with his word and pronounced them good. Lord, how thy wonders are displayed wherever I turn my eye. If I survey the ground I tread, or gaze upon the sky, there's not a plant or flower below that makes thy glories known. And clouds arise and tempests flow by order of thy throne. Creatures that borrow life from thee are subject to thy care. There's not a place where we can flee, but God is present there.
The words are different.
My song is totally different.
Yeah, me too. Well, I got the real one, so I have
Okay.
442.
I think my phone's sitting somewhere and it's got the internet on it, so it needs to be turned off. I don't know where.
442?
Yes.
What phone have you got?
It's just a little black one.
Oh, I think
How sweet are the tidings?
I just need to turn the internet on.
How sweet are the tidings?
how sweet are
Of
the
the
tidings
tidings
that
that
greet
greet
the
the
pilgrim's
pilgrim's
ear
ear
as he wanders in exile from home. Soon, soon will the Savior in glory appear, and soon will the kingdom come. He's coming, coming, coming soon, I know. Coming back to this earth again. And the weary pilgrims will to glory go when the Savior comes to reign. The mossy old graves where the pilgrims sleep shall be open as wide as before. And the millions that sleep in the mighty deep shall live on this earth once more. He's coming, coming, coming soon, I know. Coming back to this earth again. And the weary pilgrims will to glory go when the Savior comes to reign. There will many dare to part in a happy Eden home. Sweet songs of redemption will sing.
From the north, from the south, all the ransoms shall come and worship our heavenly King. He's coming, coming, coming soon, I know. Coming back to this earth again. And the weary pilgrims will to glory go when the Savior comes to reign. Hallelujah, amen, hallelujah. Soon if faithful we all shall be there. Oh, be watchful, be hopeful, be joyful till then, and a crown of bright glory will wear. He's coming, coming, coming soon, I know, coming back to this earth again. And the weary pilgrims will to glory go when the Savior comes to reign.
Oh, good morning. Good morning. Let's open our study with a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, Lord, we thank you for a good night's sleep and the studies we've had this morning that have revealed your wondrous working with men, how you teach us and how you reveal yourself to us. We thank you for the food that we've had, fellowship, and now we've come together to study your word again. Father, we're studying things that are contradictory to your character. We pray that as we do this, that in the contrast, we would see how you do work with mankind. We pray for the Holy Spirit, for all the necessary graces that will help us to understand, to help us to make application when necessary, direct our minds to rules, to the tools that you've given. We pray, Lord, for skill and understanding. And we pray that whatever we learn, Lord, would be to your glory and the edification of the saints. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Is your mic on, Terry?
Turn it off. So I'm going to dive into some history today. We started by looking in Revelation chapter 12 and seeing the interaction between the dragon and the woman, and the purpose of understanding the dynamics between the dragon and the woman in the beginning of Revelation chapter 12 is so that we can understand what the dynamics are when we get to the end of Revelation chapter 12, which is the time we're living in. So Uriah Smith took us back to the history prior to the birth of the Messiah. We were looking about how the tail of the dragon sweeps away the stars of heaven, which has taken us back into the Hasmonean dynasty. And I guess traditional teaching would teach us, is kind of given the story that, once upon a time, there was this very evil king called Antiochus Epiphanes, and he hated Jews, and he waged this terrible war to persecute Jews, and then they rose up in rebellion against him and fought this mighty battle. They were heroes, and they restored Jewish independence. But that's a really simplistic understanding of that history, and modern scholars have most modern scholars today revisiting that have really just rejected that whole idea. Not that saying that Antiochus Epiphanes was a saint, but we now look at it with very different eyes. So in studying that history, we went way back to when the Jews originally went into captivity, which is under Babylon in 723 BC. And we looked at what the situation was like for God's people in captivity to these different kingdoms. And would somebody like to explain the thread that we saw as we went through those kingdoms? What was the situation like for them?
They caused their own trouble.
They caused their own trouble. So what were these kingdoms' attitude towards the Jews?
Same as everyone else. Keep them happy, just give us your money.
Pay your tribute. You can play religion, whatever, butters your toast, that's fine. Play your religion, just pay your tribute, be good citizens. And so I think the word is suzerainty. Is anybody suzerain? I'll just look that up. But it's where I'm just going to look up that word and see that anything. No, it's not going to come up there. That's all right. So it's they were obviously in our prophetic understanding they were in captivity, but they certainly had relative freedom, religious freedom, even political freedom to a certain extent. The powers that be would step in from time to time and appoint certain leaders if there was any trouble. But really, they were almost semi-autonomous under these in these captivities. So that was true of Babylon, Medo-Persia. Of course, we know that there were blips in these histories as far as Daniel chapter 3 and Daniel chapter 6 under Babylon and Medo-Persia, where religious liberties were impeded. We have those stories. But certainly, when we get into the time period of Greece, which we saw was that period of darkness. It's not in the Bible narrative. The Old Testament takes us into the time of the Persians, the New Testament is Rome, so Greece is really entirely left out of the Bible, other than in Daniel chapter 11 when we've got the toing and froing between the king of the north and the king of the south. So under Greece, though, Greece was a very accepting religion, just like you would have cultural clashes between any different cultures. The Greeks couldn't understand the Jews, and but they tolerated them. The Jews, however, they took quite a liking to Grecian culture, and the majority were trying to inculcate that into their own way of life. The Greeks we talked yesterday about how their culture really changed the world, and it was the culture that really kept the kingdom together. But we're very familiar with the history of Greece. That it was started by Alexander the Great, but didn't last long. And on his deathbed, they said, "Who are you going to leave your kingdom to?" And what did he say? Anybody know what Alexander said? He said, "To the greatest." So what did that mean?
You can fight over
Fight it out, and they did. So that wasn't real clever of him. So they did, they fought it out, and that's really the rest of the history of Greece. Until we're left with our two main opponents, which is the king of the north, the Seleucid Empire, and the king of the south, the Ptolemaic Empire. So when we look at the problems within God's people, it's a bit complex. It's not just about being a Hellenist and being a traditionalist. If only it was that simple. So there's two camps. There's Hellenists, which means they want to imbibe more of the Greek culture into their way of life. And then there's traditionalists, or we would call them conservatives. But it is a bit more complex than that, because so when Greece broke up into many and then into two, we saw that there were 6 Syrian wars that went on between 319 BC and 307. And Judea changed hands 7 times until the Battle of Paneum, when Antiochus III defeated Ptolemy V, and then Israel stayed in under the king of the north from then on. So it was ping-ponging until this battle. So even within Judea, you had Jews.
I just went dead. Now I'm back on.
Good.
Well, no, I'm just waiting a second. Writing the memory card was not completely good. You want to recover the data. Damaged data. Where did it go? Where did that happen? Should have quoted junk. One second, sorry. Okay. Recording now.
Okay, so we just go back, we were looking at about how it's a little bit more complex than God's people being divided up between Hellenists and traditionalists. Because in this history, Israel's being to and fro between the king of the north and the king of the south. So within God's people, you've got people that are pro-Ptolemy and pro-Seleucus. So they've got religious leanings, cultural leanings, either way, but they've also got political leanings. So you've got pro-Seleucid versus pro-Ptolemy. So they have prefer which political party is ruling. I mean, politics looked a bit different. So all those things combined led the Jews to have there was a couple of civil wars that went on because of this. It was a divided people. So Antiochus III, he was the one who went to Asia and he got elephants and he came back and he expanded the Seleucid Empire. He defeated Ptolemy at the Battle of Paneum. And then we saw how he was pretty friendly with Hannibal. And Hannibal was from, do you remember we looked it up after. Does anybody know where Hannibal's from? Remember? Carthage. Carthage is where? Africa, Northern Africa. So, and he's an enemy of Rome. And so Rome took quite offense that Antiochus was getting friendly with Hannibal. I think that's a history we might have to look into, because that's when Rome came against Antiochus III and defeated him in a battle. And Antiochus, while he could keep most of his kingdom, he lost some of it, and he had to send his son to Rome as hostage. And he ended up being Antiochus IV, our villain in this story. So Antiochus IV, he's living in Rome, and when he's living in Rome, he sees how Rome operates. He sees the power and the strength of Rome. So when his dad dies and he goes back home to restore his dad's kingdom, and he decides to take Egypt, and Gaius comes out of Alexander and says, cease and desist, go home. What does Antiochus Epiphanes do? He knows to go home. He's lived in Rome. He's seen the powerhouse that Rome is. He knows he doesn't stand a chance. So it's that going home and keeping what he's got, keeping his own kingdom. So he goes home, and he goes home via Jerusalem. And what's happening in Jerusalem? It's a mess. And we looked at it, it's a mess basically because, one, they thought he died in Egypt. And you've got all this tension going on between those that want Greek rule and those that want autonomous rule, those that are pro-Seleucid, pro-Antiochus, and those that want the king of the south, and it's just a mess. Now, the lead up to that mess, this is, well, we're just going to look at a bit of this history now. So the lead up to that mess is what has been happening under Antiochus IV is he has been ruling Jerusalem, and the high priest of Jerusalem he died. I think his name was Simon, and he died. And of course, what happens when the high priest dies? Who takes his place? His son. It comes down the family line. So his son was a fellow called Ananias. So Ananias was meant to take the role of high priest. But there's this fellow called Jason. Now, what's the first thing you're going to realise when you see a man called Jason?
Your name.
What kind of name?
An English name?
It's not Jewish, is it? So what is it? It's a very Greek name. Okay, so remember what happened under Alexander the Great? So, you know, we don't want to upset you, so we'll name our kids after you. And gradually in this history, as they imbibe Greek culture, you see a lot of Greek names coming in. And that's why I looked it up. Judas is the Greek for Judah. It's like John is Greek for Yohanan, you know, and Matthew is Greek for Mattathias, or, you know, we get our Bible, we get it straight, you know, it's Greek, really. So that's why we see those names. Luke, of course, is Greek.
So when we see Jesus and he's from the tribe of Judah, then that makes Judas even more close counterfeit. He's Judah.
Yeah.
Jesus is Judah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's why sometimes you'll see Judah and sometimes you see Judas. It depends on whether they're being Greek or Jewish. But this guy, his name is Jason. And guess what he wants? He wants to be high priest. So if he's not of the family line, how's he going to go about being high priest? Because if you're high priest, you've got power, you've got control, you've got money. It's about position. So, and you want to rule because you're pro-Hellenist, you're pro-Seleucid. So you're going to go to Antiochus IV, and what are you going to say to him? You want to be high priest. What do? You bribe him. Say, I'll give you some money. Can I be high priest? And Antiochus goes, okay, sure. And Jason pays to be high priest. So he goes back. On his way back, his brother, Menelaus, I think it's Menelaus. His brother goes to Antiochus and says, I'll offer you more money. I want to be high priest. So what's Antiochus going to do? Cool. He takes more money and appoints Menelaus. So what do you got back in Jerusalem? So you not only got this and you got this intrigue, political intrigue going on for the office of high priest. It's as bad as you can imagine. So the problem is when Antiochus IV goes to Egypt and the word gets back to Jerusalem that he's dead, then you've got all these factions. Because Jason wants high priest, you've got the traditionalists wanting to put Ananias back, and it is civil war. And really the history from here on in is just, it's just civil war between different factions within God's people. And so we read about how Antiochus came on his way back home, and he saw that the person that he did appoint, Menelaus, in the end, has been deposed. And I think Jason got back in and he said, that's not who I put in, plus they're warring. Why do they do this? And he said, they're Jews. Jews fight. That's the nature of them. So, well, okay, we're going to stamp that out. And that's when he imposed all those horrible, he enacted that persecution that we're all familiar with. And that's why that persecution was so bad that who did most people, Bible students, think that Antiochus Epiphanes was? Antichrist. Yeah, the little horn power of Daniel chapter 8, the wicked one. And that's one of the things that Miller had to fight, is to show, no, he wasn't that. And the thing is, he was painted as this really, he was kind of demonized in a way. Well, like I said, he was pretty bad. But he only imposed those restrictions on the Jews. No other peoples under his watch had that same persecution. So, like you said, they brought it all upon themselves. Now, this all happened in 175 BC. And 1st and 2nd Maccabees is the history of 175 BC to 134 BC. And it's that history there. So I thought what we would do first off is if you could turn to your book on the Apocrypha that you've got on your devices. We'll just have a look at a portion of the 1st Maccabees. So what you've got to do is open it up, scroll down to where you see 1st Maccabees and then chapter 1 and double click on that and it should open. You're all there? We're good? Okay. So let's read around the room. Sister Kate, could you start and we'll just read verses 1 to 6. It's easy reading.
And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persian and Medes, that he reigned instead the first over Greece, and made many wars, and won many strongholds, and slew the kings of the earth, and went through to the ends of the earth, and took spoil of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him, whereupon he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up. And he gathered a mighty strong host, and ruled over countries and nations, and kings who became tributaries unto him. And after these things he fell sick, and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable, and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive.
Thank you. So that's the story of Alexander the Great, and we're all familiar with that. So we'll continue reading. And Brother Henry, could you read verses 7 to 10?
So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died. And his servants bare rule, every one in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years. And evils were multiplied in the earth. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been in hostage at Rome. And he reigned in the 130 of 70 year of kingdom of Greece.
Okay, so that year is 175. Some sources say 176. So 176, 175 BC is where we're bringing that. So what Maccabees has done is jumped from Alexander the Great, all his servants ruled, which is all this history, until this guy here, Antiochus Epiphanes. Verse 11. That's not verse, but well, I guess it is a verse. Verse 11, Brother Debray.
In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, Let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow.
Okay, so who are these wicked men that want to make a covenant?
Oh, yes.
Based on what we've sort of learnt so far. They want to make a covenant with the heathen. Who are the heathen?
That would be the king, wouldn't it be?
The Greeks.
The Greek.
So the heathen are the Greeks. The wicked men would be the Hellenists. So from the start then,
Are we all to answer when you ask the question? I wasn't sure.
I guess I was asking whoever reads, but then if they have trouble then, by all means, jump in. So what does that tell us about the author of First Maccabees in verse 11?
He's a Jew.
He's a Jew. And what's his leanings?
He's a conservative.
He's a traditionalist, he's a conservative, because it's the wicked men that want to make a covenant with the heathen. So we know which side the author is on. And he says, this device pleased them well. Let's continue reading Debray 12 to 15.
So this device pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem, according to the customs of the heathen, and made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief.
Okay, so they built a gymnasium next to the temple. We discussed how they spent a lot of money having these painful surgeries to reverse their circumcision. They forsook the holy covenant, because what was the sign of the covenant? Circumcision. So once you do that, you're forsaking the covenant. The next portion of the story is going to tell us about how Antiochus then went down to Egypt, and we've discussed that history. And we'll just jump in. Sister Tiffany, if you could read verses 20 to 24.
And after that Antiochus had smitten Egypt, he returned again in the 143rd year, and went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude, and entered proudly into the sanctuary, and took away the golden altar, and the candlestick of light, and all the vessels thereof, and the table of showbread, and the pouring vessels, and the vials, and the censers of gold, and the veil, and the crown, and the golden ornaments that were before the temple, all which he pulled off. He took also the silver and the gold, and the precious vessels. Also he took the hidden treasures which he found. And when he had taken all away, he went into his own land, having made a great massacre, and spoke very proudly.
Okay, and verse 25.
Therefore, there was a great mourning in Israel in every place where they were.
Okay, so what don't we get from this part of the story?
Why he did it.
Why he did it, yeah. There's no background. Just, once upon a time, this evil king came and did something really bad. And everybody's really sad. So that's what he did. So let's jump into, we know he left soldiers there. Just verse 29 says, and after 2 years fully expired, the king sent his chief collector of tribute unto the cities of Judah, who came unto Jerusalem with a great multitude, and spake peaceable words unto them, but all was deceit. So he's left soldiers there to collect tribute. He's selling them a story, and we won't read all of that. But we'll jump down into verse 41. Verse 41. Read, Victoria, could you read verses 41 to 43?
Okay. Moreover, Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion, and sacrificed unto idols, and profaned the Sabbath.
Okay, so what is this telling us King Antiochus did?
He united the people, he united the people, but it's interesting that they consented to his religion and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath. So they disregarded all their beliefs and submitted to what he commanded.
And I guess the word there in verse 43 is many.
Yeah.
So many.
Not all of them.
Not all, but many.
Yeah.
Right? So many consented to what Antiochus wanted, but it says here that he wrote it to his whole kingdom. He wrote this. And this is where history disagrees. There's no record that he did this in anywhere else outside of Israel. He didn't require it of anybody else.
So I got a question then, what would be then the whole kingdom, or what would be his reign? Was it just Jerusalem because that's the only area that he conquered? Or would it be outside of Jerusalem as well?
Oh no, he had a vast empire. And he's busy, like the Jews are just that annoying mosquito that won't go away. Because he's up north, he's fighting Parthians, he's got bigger, and he's got Rome kind of breathing on his neck from the west, he's got the Parthians on the east, and he's trying to look after his whole kingdom. And you've got this minority down in the south on the border between you and the country that you really want. He's trying to shore up his southern border. But on the scale of things, this is the least of his problems. So this is why he's just come in with a heavy hands, going to stamp out that problem. I'm going home. I'm done with it. I've got bigger fish to fry. So Rome's not ruling the world yet, but Rome's on its way. The Seleucid Empire is on its way out. Rome is rising. Rome is breathing down his neck, but Rome hasn't arrived.
Okay, I'm missing a little bit of something here.
Sure.
So Antiochus, was he part of the traditionalists or part of the Hellenists?
Antiochus, okay, so think Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. That works really well, except we get messed up with Greece. Because what is Greece? It is Alexander the Great. It is a whole heap of generals. It is the Seleucids and the Ptolemies. Greece goes from here all the way through till when do we say this is mostly Greece. Even right down to here, it's Greece. It's just that Greece is divided. So the king of the south is Greece, the king of the north is Greece. Ptolemy is Greece, Seleucus is Greece. So Antiochus is Greek, but this is all the history of God's people in captivity to Greece. So is he a Hellenist? Yes, because Hellenist just means you're Greek. The Hellenists are Jews that we would call them liberals. Because Greece was the kingdom that ruled the world. So when we do make application of Greece, what do we refer to Greece as? The world. So we would say they're worldly, if we're going to put it in today's language. Back then you weren't worldly, you were Greekly or Hellenists.
Okay.
Does that help?
It does. So primarily when we're talking about traditionalists, we're talking about the religious aspect as far as those.
This is about the Jews.
Jews.
It's not about the Greeks. The Greeks are happy getting on with their life. Ptolemy has always just been happy being Greek, building a library in Alexandria. Because the first Ptolemy, never had any aspirations to rule the whole kingdom. He had the jewel. He had Egypt. He didn't need Syria. He didn't need any of that trouble. He just wanted Egypt. So he's down in Egypt, very happy. What's the problem? All the other kingdoms want Egypt. So he's kind of fending off. He doesn't want Syria, but in order to protect his kingdom, he's got to keep coal Syria. This is the Mediterranean. This is Arabia, the deserts of Arabia. And this is coal Syria. This is oversimplification. But why they're fighting back and forth is, what do we call this area in our terminology, in our prophetic language? Sphere of influence. So you're keeping your borders to keep them at bay. So that's why they're fighting back and forth here, is to protect their own kingdom. And so we've got to a battle of Panium, and this Seleucid, the king of the north, the Seleucid Empire, has finally, for the last time, taken control of coal Syria. So that border is going to be forever there until when? Until they decide they actually want to go further. They never get a chance to go further, because who's going to go further? Who's going to take it? Rome. But Egypt has lost that protective boundary. But you've got Jerusalem over here, and the people are divided, because some people like to be Republican, some people like to be Democrat. But it's all, whatever name you, some people prefer to be under this kingdom, and some people prefer to be that. So they're in no man's land. They're in the middle. And the principle is, God's people are always in the middle, and they can't make up their mind.
Was Palestine part of coal Syria back then? Were they actually in coal Syria?
This is an oversimplification, so I've just put it in. I haven't drawn them out to scale. But that's they're in the middle, so they're part of that. They're part of that. Yeah, coal Syria is not that whole area.
And so when Antiochus comes into the picture, he's coming from the south? Am I correct?
No.
He's coming.
Antiochus is a Seleucid king of the Seleucid Empire.
Okay,
so when you look at all the names, sometimes they're called Seleucus 2, 3, 4, whatever. Sometimes they have Antiochus as their name. And what can trip you up is these usually have Ptolemies as their name, but they could be Ptolemy Epiphanes. This is Antiochus Epiphanes, but you might have a Ptolemy Epiphanes, because they like to call themselves, It's like this fellow's Antiochus the Great, because he's borrowed it, I guess, from Alexander the Great. This fella here is Antiochus Epiphanes. His name, actually isn't his real name. He was called something else. You know, Dad gave him a name, but when he decided to leave Rome, to escape from Rome, to take over from his father, he called himself Antiochus after his father, and Epiphanes. Epiphanes means the illustrious one. Do you remember what did I say? Because what did the people call him? His subjects didn't call him Antiochus Epiphanes. They called him Antiochus Epimanes, which means Antiochus the idiot. Okay, so you know.
You don't get to choose your own name.
No. So it was a play on words. So he wasn't that respected in his own kingdom. We could make application. So do you get the dynamics of that a bit better? That when we're talking about Antiochus, not a Jew, but within the Jews, they've got different leanings.
So,
Like, who do we like being in control of us better? The North or the South?
I have a question. So Maccabees is writing this, right? Is he the author? He's the author of this, and right?
No,
Okay.
we don't know who wrote it.
Oh, okay,
Well, all we know that it was a traditionalist
okay.
because of the way he's writing. The wicked people are the Hellenists that are forsaking the covenant. So we know they're traditionalists. We can tell that it is somebody that actually was familiar with this history. So it's not written, you know, decades or anything later. It's somebody within or close to this history, but we don't know exactly who's written it.
But where I'm going to is that here it says to his whole kingdom, but you also told us that it wasn't. He only did it for the Jews, you know, made that law for the Jews. So how can we say that this is not true? You know, if we're going by this and we're you know, looking at it as not as a standard, but as a book that we can get useful information from, how can we say it's reliable if that is not true?
Okay, so have we said it's reliable?
No. Oh yeah, that's right. It's not that.
Yeah, so what's the standard book?
Right, the Bible.
The Bible. But the wiser to understand this. So we were discussing this, Katie and I were discussing this earlier. Do you want to explain how you came to an understanding of why we're looking at these kingdoms?
We're looking at these kingdoms because we want to understand the line of distinction between the truth and the error, and also to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes, you know, as they do. And so what we realize is that we always, even from prophecy, we always look at the work of the enemy. It's always there, you know, but we can call it the papacy, for example, we can call it, but it's still the work of the enemy. And it gave us, you know, the history that should not be repeated, but it also gave us, you know, the true character of what God is, you know. So that's why, you know, it's important for us to understand and not repeat, you know, the same mistake, because their history is more internal history. This is a Jewish history. This is SDA. This is us, you know. So that is really important for us to have this, this understanding.
So I understand that. I'm not saying that it's not wrong to study, to read, or to refer. I'm just saying that if just that one thing, I mean, how could we're reading this and another place we find something else, how do we know which one is, well, I guess
what we're doing is we're reading some Fox News.
Yeah.
They're reporting on the same news. That whatever they're reporting on has actually happened. It depends on what perspective that you're getting it from.
And what's interesting is that we already know that it's written by a conservative, you know, and we know that conservative, you know, they're the one, you know, who have those conspiracy theories, you know. So I don't know, and to me, you know, it's interesting to see, you know, what kind of a position we should have, you know, either we are conservative or either we are liberal.
Or we're
Or we're
somewhere in the middle. We're not involved in this civil war at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, and that's the point. When we talked about Antiochus, he went down to Egypt. What came back to Jerusalem that caused him to put him into civil war? And if you read the historians, they'll call it fake news. It was fake news. Yeah, it was fake news that got reported back that caused all the trouble. So what we're reading really is propaganda, but it's the events are still the same. It wasn't Antiochus did this, but I guess the picture it's painting is that he's the evil one, we're the good ones, and we didn't deserve it. But history is telling us. So we actually talked about Josephus, and we've got this. What I've neglected to mention is Josephus got a lot of his material from Nicholas of Damascus, and Nicholas of Damascus was a court historian for Herod. So I mean, Herod, not a saint either, but he was a court historian. So there are some. We don't have any of Nicholas of Damascus's works. All we got to rely on Josephus using Nicholas of Damascus. But I think if you were to Google today, what we're doing, the majority of people, even now Jews, you'll see Jews coming out and saying, wow, well, we're a mess back here. But that's not what was understood for many, many years. And now they've actually been honest about this history. And my sister was saying, we learn it so we don't repeat it. What we've got here is a reform line. So what does that mean?
That change.
It has been repeated or is being repeated. Somewhere this history is being repeated. We're either in it or it's been. I'm not sure yet because it's prior to the time of the end. But it's still I think what we're looking at is a counterfeit reform line. Because what's going to happen to these people? They're in a mess, so what has to happen? They've got to be reformed. So what's reform going to look like in this history, and how's it going to end up? Because if it's a reform line, how should it, was it success? Was it failure? What does failure look like? Or, it's, let's see how, because they believed that it was God who was reforming them. That's what the revolt and the rebellion was about. Is we need to reform. Well, let's see how they brought reformation about. And then we can compare it to how God brings reformation about. And we know that within our movement, we have two movements, in a sense. There's a false movement. How do they bring about reformation? So I don't think they're going anywhere. We've had people fall away, and then it's like bye-bye, where are they? You don't even hear from them. We're headed into different territory now. So I'm not making full application of this line, but I am suggesting that it is a counterfeit. I'm not suggesting, it is a counterfeit reformation. God wasn't in this, and we can read that. So I guess the portion that we read was that King Antiochus said that his whole kingdom should be one people. No, he didn't. He wanted these to be Greeks. Stop your mucking around.
So according to my understanding then, according to what we're reading here with Antiochus, he came from the north, went down to Egypt, conquered, and then as he's passing on back up, he passes on through Jerusalem, and then this is where he causes havoc.
And he's had interaction. So he what was the date? It's not. I'll have to find the date. I think that I put it down. When he obviously he was king prior to 175 BC, but not that many years prior. So he's interacting with them because they're part of his kingdom, like he's interacting with all parts of his kingdom, because they're fighting over what here? Who's going to be high priest? And so they're sending, and the capital of this area is not Jerusalem, because they're not in control. The capital of this area is Antioch, as it would, Where did Constantine rule from? Constantinople. You know, Antiochus is all the ruled from Antioch. So Antioch is the capital of this. So you're sending your people back and forth from Antioch to go and say, you know, somebody's got to take the tribute back, somebody's got to take the money back. And so then you've got this political intrigue of these men wanting to take over the high priest when they're not even in the high priestly line. That's how it had developed. This has been going on for some time. This doing away with, you know, because what are the liberals saying? You know, we don't have to be Levites of the tribe of Levi. We don't have to be of the priestly line. Give me a go. I want to have a go at being high priest. So this is what's happening here. But also you got these two brothers trying to fight it out as well, who can give him the most money. So your question was, have we answered your question?
Yes, but I think what I was kind of trying to get a picture of now, because there's so many different generals, and of course, Antiochus would be one of those generals, right?
No, he's king.
He is king.
He's king. His dad, Antiochus III, was king.
So
King of the north.
So he ruling pretty well Greece.
Greece is divided.
Yeah.
So Antiochus has got the north of Greece. Ptolemy's got the south of Greece, but it's Greece. So Greece is a divided kingdom.
Okay, and even though...
So we don't say that. We say king of the north, king of the south. We don't say king of the north of Greece and king of the south of Greece, because that's just too long. Okay,
so when we're talking about Antiochus going down to Egypt and conquering, did he really conquer, or was this... How does that look?
He tried. He did. He actually got most of Egypt very, very quickly until he came to the port city of Alexandria. And why was it called Alexandria? Because the first Ptolemy, when Alexander the Great died, as they're shifting Alexander's body, he ran over to wherever he was in the kingdom and stole the body and took it back and buried it in Alexandria. They stole Alexander the Great's body and then built a city called Alexandria. I mean, Ptolemy, clever guy. He knew what he was doing. Because, you know, he's got the body of Alexander the Great and he builds this city and he's setting himself up forever. And of course, I mean, we have a lot, you know the story of the Bible, like they built that great big library. It was the huge educational center of the empire. And even the Jews sent their best and brightest over to Alexandria to be educated. And they built this library. And as the ships would come into the port, they would scour the ships for books. Any books? Any books? And what they would do is they say, can we borrow your books? And they would borrow the book. They would make copies of it and give the copy back to the ship and put the book in the library. So a ship rocks up and you got any books? Yeah, I've got the Old Testament. It wasn't called the Old Testament, but you know, oh good, give us that. Problem was, what language was it in? Jewish. So they had to translate it into Greek, and it took how many men to do it? Septuagint. 70 men to do it, and that's all because we can thank Ptolemy, who built the Library of Alexandria, who wanted to own every book on the planet. And that's how it ended up.
Yeah.
So, now why did I bring that up? I don't know. So, you can imagine there's a lot going on here, because if you were like, you know, Greek didn't mean that you just wanted to be, you know, eat pork. It's just you wanted to be civilized. You wanted to be educated. You wanted to move up in the world. You know, you wanted to just be like a peasant growing potatoes in the ground in some, you know, town, little village back there. You wanted to move on with your career, and you know, many things at play here. You know, you wanted to go to a good uni. So, not that it's wrong to go to a good university, but you know, a lot of the dynamics that are happening there are very similar to today. So, you know, the Ptolemies, and of course there wasn't just one Ptolemy, you know, like there wasn't one Antiochus or Seleucus. So, you know, they replace each other, but we still, but the Ptolemy is the one who's really got probably, he doesn't own the vastness of the empire that the king of the north will own, but we call it the what? The breadbasket. You know, he's got everything he needs. He can sit down here pretty. They can fight it up out there. The problem is when there wants Egypt, and everybody wants Egypt. If we were to look more into the history of this time, the problem with Egypt after Ptolemy V dies is the rulers in Egypt are very, very young. And so what do? They need a babysitter. So who have they asked to babysit them? Rome. So Rome's entering the picture here from different areas. It's just stealthily moving in. So yeah, we'll look after your kids for you. So he's looking after the kids here. And so when Antiochus is coming down into Egypt, what do the Egyptians do? They send a quick boat over to Rome saying, you better send some help. And they send Gaius over to Alexandria, and Gaius doesn't come with an army. And he doesn't walk out there and meet Antiochus with soldiers. He just walks out there and doesn't even shake his hand, and he says, you go home. That's the power that Rome, it's the arrogance of Rome. It's just their arrogance. But like I said, Antiochus had been captive in Rome, and he saw how they operated. And he knew that he couldn't mess with them, even though he was that much far away from conquering Egypt. Maybe if he had a little bit more guts, he should have just done it, but he didn't. So he went home in a foul mood. And you know, when you're in a bad mood and your kids are really acting up, that's what's happened. So you've got two forces at play. But we've been told that it was all about Antiochus. Now we're starting to see that really this is complicated trouble within God's people.
So when he came, did he actually take all these elements that Jerusalem had from the sanctuary?
Yes. Yes. That's why, they would call him the abomination. He desolated the sanctuary. So he took everything. He took the candlestick. He ravaged it and totally desecrated it. Killed, I can't remember how many thousands he killed. But you don't kill everybody. He could have killed everybody, but if you kill everybody, what happens? Someone's got to pay your taxes. So you do just as much as you to scare the life out of everybody and to calm the situation down.
Bring them under your domain.
Bring them under, put that heavy foot on them, stop. And he stopped them, except there's these little villages. And what's in the villages? Conservatives, traditionalists. Traditionalists with a lot more guts than Antiochus. So, did it happen? Yes. Is it the full picture? No.
So what were you talking about?
So that was verses 41. King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people and everyone should leave his laws. And so all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Not quite. He just put his foot down here. So, yes, that's not cold Syria, but I think you get the point.
So he marched down into Egypt with his army.
Yes.
Comes without an army and tells him to go home.
Yeah.
And he goes home just
Yeah.
a place of one man or lives a few men.
He's grown up mostly, I don't know how many years he was in Rome. But it's like I said, it's like going to boarding school. He was educated, they looked after him.
So he knows that if he doesn't obey this, it's just going to whistle and bring his army down.
Yeah, so, and that's the purpose of taking the kids hostage.
Mm-hmm.
You don't lock them up in a prison cell, you show them. You educate them, you You know, he got to see how it operated. So they had to profane. They weren't allowed to keep Sabbath. They weren't allowed to have scriptures. Any scrolls were burnt. Sacrificed pigs. Circumcision, dietary laws, everything. Everything that made you a Jew was banned. So they did burnt offerings. Yes.
Sorry. So the Hellenes didn't care because they embraced the Greek culture. Is that right?
I would say they did care because they didn't want it that bad. They wanted they weren't saying I don't want to be a Jew anymore. But you've got to be careful what you wish for. Does that make sense? Like none of them would have been that happy. Hellenists just wanted to be Jews, but they wanted to be Jew with a bit of Greek culture. They wanted to be a Jew, they wanted to keep Sabbath, but they also wanted to visit the gym on Friday night.
Liberal ethnicity.
That's right. So what they got, the heavy hand that they got, they didn't want that. They didn't want thousands killed. So I would say nobody's happy, but they brought it on themselves. We kept reading verse 44. For the king had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem. Now they're saying how it affects them. And the cities of Judah, that they should follow the strange laws of the land and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days, and pollute the sanctuary and holy people, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts. That they should also leave their children uncircumcised and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation, to the end that they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. And whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he said he should die. And he wrote it to his whole kingdom, and he appointed overseers that were to go from city to city to make sure that it was implemented in every town, village, city, right across the kingdom there. Verse 53 says, and drove the Israelites into secret places, even wheresoever they could flee for succor. So, verse 54. Who are we up to? Is that Emma?
How much do you want to read?
We'll talk about 54.
Now, the 15th day of the month Caslu, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar and builded idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side.
Okay, so this is what they call the abomination of desolation, and they can put a date to it. The 15th day of the month Caslu. I think you'll find it's the 25th of December, what we would call Christmas, the abomination of desolation. I better double check that. And then it goes on to say they tore up the book of the law, they burnt it all, they burnt foreign incense, and you had the Bible, they, verse 57, and wheresoever was found with any book of the testament or of any consented to the law, the king's commandment was that they should be put into death. Okay. And some terrible things. They hung children, and it was pretty bad, as bad as it gets. So we're all good there about the circumstances under Antiochus. Any questions?
And he did this for 3.5 years, didn't he? Because there's a 1260 in there, isn't there? A little.
Yes, I haven't quite worked that out, so I don't think it was actually that long.
Okay.
So,
and what it says,
because it's 165 BC is when this rebellion. So that doesn't leave 3.5 years between 167 and 165.
Some kind of inclusive thing.
Yes, I'm trying to get my head around that. But if you have any thoughts?
No, I don't know. I looked at it years ago. And
And
the
some
evangelicals teach it's a literal 3.5 years, and we make it obviously day for a year. And so it all fits, their logic fits, that this is the abomination of desolation, he was literal 3.5 years.
Yeah.
This trampling of the Gentile, of the Jews.
I just couldn't find a 3.5.
Okay, and when it says 145th year, what's that?
Oh, yeah, so, yeah, that's different. So we're looking at 175, 175, no. Yeah, the rebellion doesn't rise up until 167.
Okay, so we're going back into this, something about the time.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, we might double check those dates. I mean, 167 for sure. I'm just not sure. Oh, I've marked 175 is when they mark First Maccabees. So
And
yes, it's taken.
It's called Maccabees because it's all about Judah Maccabee.
Yeah.
That period.
How long?
10 minutes.
Okay, we'll start chapter 2. We'll look at chapter 2.
15 minutes.
Okay, so Sister Emma, could you read?
I just have one
Yes,
more question
yeah, sure.
for clarity. So, Antiochus, he's the one, he's going back and he's like dealing with, as we want to put it this way, dealing with the Jews, because they're having this civil war fighting over who's going to be the high priest. But why did he do so much to put like fear in them instead of just put a high priest in place?
When he's turned up, they're not just sitting around a table having an argument. It's civil war. They're killing each other. It's war.
Okay.
You know, I'm not saying that in any kind of, in any sense of it being, you know, like hyperbole. It's,
Okay.
they were warring. They were fighting each other.
Okay.
So some of them are pro Ptolemy, some of them are pro Antiochus. So, you know, some of them are happy that he's going down there and he's going to be, they're listening to the news, who's going to win? And they're, you know, talking about it, and then word gets back that, oh, Ptolemy's won. So this fight over the high priest, that was brutal. Like, they killed people. God's people were God's people's own worst enemy. So he hasn't just walked in on an argument, he's walked in on war.
That makes sense. Yeah.
You know, people are dying in the streets, and then they say that he's the bad person.
So when he gets there, Jason Reynolds, who's there? Jason.
Jason. And he didn't put Jason, he put Menelaus. Right? Even though Jason asked him first and given money, Jason left the city. Once it was heard that Antiochus had died, Jason marches, got his band of followers and soldiers, and he marches on Jerusalem. Says, I want to be high priest. So that's really basically where the war. So it's not like, yeah, so Jason had to actually leave Jerusalem when Menelaus is high priest, because it wasn't safe for him. But as soon as he hears that Antiochus is dead, he's coming back with his mates and wants his position back. And it's war. And then you've got people that are supporting him, people that are supporting Menelaus, people this, people that. It's just.
So when you say Antiochus is dead, this is not the Antiochus that now comes back up after being talked about.
Yes, he's not dead. They heard that he's dead.
Oh, they heard it.
The rumour came back, he died. Because they're listening, they're watching the news, they're Googling, okay, who won today? Who won the primary? You know, oh, he's inching towards Alexandria. Oh, he's at Alexandria. You know, it might take a bit for it to get back. But like anything, this rumour's got back, you know, fake news that he died.
So Jason comes down, at the time he thinks he's dying, he's fighting, and then Antiochus comes back up.
And you can imagine,
it's
not going to take him, you know, he's not going to get back there overnight, is it? He's got to march. So this war, this is really civil war that goes on over a period of time.
So it's Jason fighting his brother in that time.
Yes.
And then Antiochus comes and kills everybody's brother.
Yes.
And goes for the war.
Yes.
So really the true inheritor of the high priest doesn't even have a chance.
Whoever that is.
Oh, no, it's the one with the bigger, yes, one with the money.
I mean, how did they decide anyway? Was it family line?
Yes,
I mean,
it
it
should have been.
been. But when at the time of Christ, I think, as I read, he talks about how the bloodshed, it was the road to the high priest was bloodshed
Yes.
and cruelty and extortion and bribery.
Yes.
But, yeah.
And I mean, it didn't start here. This is something that developed over time. We don't see it back under the Medes and Persians, but certainly, yeah, I don't know I don't know if Jewish history marks it. Maybe they do. They have their own history. So it's meant to be the tribe of Levi. And a particular line. It's not just the high priest. Even the priests isn't. Yes, it doesn't. And we're going to look at that. Sort of. Yeah. No, you'll see that that'll come up in chapter 2. So you want to read, Emma, verses 1 to go 1 to 8.
In those days, Mattathias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, a priest of the sons of Joarib from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modin. And he had 5 sons, Johanan called Cadiz, Simon called Thasi, Judas, who was called Maccabeus, Eleazar called Avaran, and Jonathan, whose surname was Apaphus. And when he saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem, he said, "Woe is me, wherefore was I born to see this misery of my people and of the holy city, and to dwell there when it was delivered into the hand of the enemy, and the sanctuary into the hand of strangers. Her temple is become as a man without glory."
Okay, so this is Mattathias. And what we might do here is start a family tree.
So when it's talking about Judas being called Maccabeus, is that the book of what we're reading here?
Yes, so
You of that son?
yes. So Maccabee is really just a nickname. Their family name is Hasmoneah. What did I do? So this is the Hasmonean dynasty. And I guess the elder is this man called Mattathias. I think that's a double T. It is a double T. Mattathias. He's Mattathias Hasmoneah, which I was going to double check too, but I think some scholars aren't really sure whether Hasmoneah was the original village they came from, but they think that it goes back to his great-great-grandfather, so he's 4th generation Hasmoneah. And he has 5 sons. He has Johanan and Simon and Judah and Eleazar and Jonathan, isn't it? Jonathan. What did it say? Yeah, Jonathan, Johanan, Simon, Judas. And so they all got nicknames, but Judah is, his nickname is Maccabee. Maccabee. And what does that mean? The idiot. Oh, sorry. Sorry. The hammer.
Oh, yeah, the hammer.
Is this one of those self-proclaimed names or a name given?
I think this one was given. Because it is, maybe his dad gave it to him, because we'll see that when this rebellion, this revolt begins in 167 BC, Mattathias actually dies in that year as well, and he hands it over to his son, because his son is the military genius. The son's fighting skills were obviously known within the family. Right. So whatever bravado this guy had was known, and it's like he was the one you had to put in charge. So it was the middle son. So we're in Modin. Modin is north of Jerusalem, and they're not terribly happy with what's happened, are they?
So this is one of those outskirts towns.
Yes, it's just a village, but it's not a small city. So we'll skip that. But they're very they're saying, woe is us, look at all the bad stuff that's happened. Verse 15. So we go back to Kathy. Would you like to read verse 15 of chapter 2 through to 18?
In the meanwhile, the king's officers, such as compelled the people to revolt, came into the city mocking to make them sacrifice. Oops. And when many of Israel came unto them, Matthias also and his sons came together. Then answered the king's officer and said to Matthias on this wise, thou art a ruler and an honorable and great man in this city, and strengthened with son and brethren. Now therefore come thou first and fulfill the king's commandments, like as all the heathen have done ye, and the men of Judah also, and such as remain at Jerusalem. So shalt thou and thy house be in the number of the king's friends, and thou and thy children, shall be honored with silver and gold, and many rewards.
Thank you. So can you explain that situation to us, Sister Cody?
So there's a civil war, there's a revolt in the city of Modin, and many people, come, to this revolt, and some of those people are Matthias and his son. They recognize their great abilities of fighting. The kings likes that, and so he decided, to have them on the hymn and offer them to be part, of the king's friendship. And he rewards them with silver and gold and many rewards.
So he's offering him.
He's offering, yeah.
Yeah. Do what you're told. What do you think they want Matthias to do? So this soldier is in the city on behalf of who?
Oh,
Yeah. Antiochus.
Antiochus. So Antiochus has left soldiers. They go to all the towns, and he has asked Matthias to do what?
Well, to control, to do that, to continue the revolt, but to be the man, that would do that, that would control, the revolt.
And verse 18 says, come first and
fulfill the king's commandment.
And what was the king's commandment? What did the king want him to do?
Plebeian Jews.
So, yeah, and to do that, it gets tested. Like you can say, yeah, I'm not going to be a Jew anymore. Prove it. How would you prove you're not being a Jew? What was it?
I'm sorry. They had to worship their idols and not keep the Sabbath. And what was the other thing? They had to worship their idols, not keep the Sabbath, and there was one more.
And so it isn't actually saying it explicitly here. What he's being asked to do is sacrifice a pig. So it doesn't actually say it explicitly, but he's, like you said, it's saying, come on, you'll be the first one. Step up, Matthias, you do it first. You're looked up to here, you're revered, people like you, you're wise. Come up and do it first, and you'll get rewarded.
It says in 15 to make them sacrifice.
Verse 15. Oh, yes, okay, there you go. To make them sacrifice, thank you. Yes, so it is there in the text. So come up, sacrifice a pig, and everything will be okay. In fact, it'll be better than okay. And so what does Matthias say, Brother Henry? Oh, we're finished. Oh, let's stop there. Wonder what Matthias is going to say. To be continued. All right, we'll come back to this. Let's close with prayer. Victoria, would you close with prayer?
Lord, thank you for this blessed study, Lord. We just pray that you'll continue to be with us as we study your word and go through this day. We just ask that you would give us peace and rest, and that we would continue to be open to learning and studying. And we just thank you for this time that we have here together amongst so much chaos, that we can just open up your word and see the truth that you have always wanted us to see from the beginning. So we thank you for everything in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
So get my bearing straight here. Was Hasmonia, is that the son of Matthias, or how is it?
Oh, Matthias Hasmonia, it's like his last name.
Last